to the Do It All Dad Here podcast, dad-friendly entertainment for you and me. And I'm your host, Michael Kornbluth, and this is episode 29, Raising My Kids on Speed. It's a hardcore opener, I know, but what's even more hardcore is raising not one, but two, but three kids on speed. Now, what speed am I talking about? I'm talking about what's considered the holy grail of amphetamines, otherwise known as time-release Adderall. As a kid, I was never prescribed. I really shouldn't be making these admissions because I'm pretty sure it's incriminating, considering the fact that it is a controlled substance. But I told my doctor I had a hard time focusing. I had insurance, and I've had a prescription. And I regret it. However, God forgives, and it's never too late to rectify your wrongs and to be brutally honest with who you want to be. And what I've learned, if I have one piece of wisdom that I could distill from raising three kids so far, what I've learned from just a purely observational basis is that your children absorb your habits. So I'm always telling the kids, they always ask me, so Daddy, why do you wake up so early in the morning? I said, I'm trying to replace bad habits with good habits. Of course, they don't, see me, popping Adderall pills. I never really got out of control. I'd say only in 6 years, there was 3 times where I would take multiple pills. One was on my birthday. Another time, I was just completely crazed, was really obsessed with Twitter, was getting very argumentative, and I felt it was me against the world. And you definitely feel that way, when you're a stay-at-home parent, especially if you're a stay-at-home dad, because at least stay-at-home moms have a community. And dads don't have that community, nor do they really want to seek it out either. Because, men as a whole are very competitive, very alpha, and that's fine, everything. I have no problem being competitive. But, when you see another stay-at-home dad in the street and you just pass them by, they make an effort to not even make eye contact with you. Now, for me, when I'm with my children, I'm a very happy guy because I love them. I've never resented my time on the stay-at-home dad front. And the main reason why is because I have had this golden opportunity to work on my craft being my writing, the joke generation, and really trying to develop my imagination to the fullest. And if I never became a stay-at-home parent, I never would have had the inspiration to start this podcast, which I'm grateful for. Because ego-wise, I've never been more secure knowing that we're in episode 29 and I've been cranking out jokes at a relentless pace. I mean, folks, we're talking about 25 jokes per week, which is a lot of material. A lot of material. I consider myself very prolific. Now, at the same time, if I'm brutally honest with myself, am I going to attribute all of my prolific status to speed? It helps, without a doubt. But I put in a lot of time to develop that muscle and a lot of hours. And I've had to deal with plenty of exclusion and alienation from old fake friends, from my parents. But just to tell you why anyone that takes Adderall should quit it right now, here's one reason right now. I had a huge falling out with my parents. We've literally been at each other since my children were born, because I suffered from a tremendous feeling of abandonment because after my daughter was born, they moved to Arizona, and then 2 more were born, my 2 sons, and I never got the impression that they were going to come back here anytime soon, and they never really spent an enormous amount of time with the kids back here, and I also had in-laws that were in Delaware. So, as a result, I'm also up here in the hinterlands of northern Westchester, and again, for stay-at-home dads, there isn't that, community. My community was Twitter, okay? Now, what I've noticed with Twitter is that It's a great messaging tool. It's a great giant open mic, but it's not reality. And what I've realized is that you could feed the beast all you want. It's never enough. And, these days, I don't know, how much you guys are aware of the fact, but there is massive censorship on Twitter and Facebook. Apparently, they made a pledge to the new Trump administration about changing their ways. I severely doubt it. Obviously, actions speak louder than words, and that's why I'm doing this episode, raising my kids on speed, and it's why I wanted to do this episode, because I want to make a pledge to my children, and that pledge is this: moving forward, you're going to get the best of Daddy, because you deserve that, not Speedy Daddy. Now, Speedy Daddy, cranked out 7,000 plus jokes on this website called Comedy Wire in basically a 2-year time span. John Lennon wishes he was that productive during the stay-at-home dad years. And my relationship with my children is rock solid. What I've noticed about bonding with children is that people always say, your children are so happy. I'm thinking, like, who am I, Joan Crawford over here? But the reason why, being playful with them, showing an interest in them, and just doing things with them. Playing ball, teaching my kids to play wiffle ball. Last night, my daughter, she's still not like a perfect swimmer. Now, on the internet, I got some like unbelievable tips, such as curling the toes. So we're doing like curling exercise with our toes last night, picking up pens, rotating your belly button from side to side. We're doing that on our mat. I mean, for me, that's a beautiful thing. And I know it was for them too, because they know that I care and that I'm showing an interest in their development and that I want them to succeed sooner than later and suffer less than Daddy. And, that's what the best part about what fatherhood and parenting has to offer is the ability to, play the role of molder and shaper and life coach, like the dad from This Is Us, minus the drinking problem. They say God gives children to the lonely. And I can definitely relate to that, without a doubt. And, these children give me endless riches. I remember I had this idea for an old blog where I was going to, actually, originally for this episode, I was going to call it My Sweaty 20s versus My Snuggling 40s. And how I'll take my snuggling 40s over my panic-stricken, I don't know if I'm going to get disease any second because I have no trust in condoms not breaking any day of the week. And the thing is, listen, sex, it's fun. It's a basic animalistic need. I get it. I was fortunate in the sense I didn't get married in my early 30s. So I don't feel as if I'm missing out on anything when it's all said and done. And I'm still attracted to my wife. And she's a sweet, beautiful woman from Australia. We wanted to get married in Australia originally. Yet my mom shot down that concept when I brought it up to her. At the time, she goes, "Son, Australia is a very long flight from New York, and your father doesn't love you that much." So the compromise that I said to my wife, I said, "Babe, how about this? Assuming we have a boy one day, instead of hiring a rabbi for our son's circumcision, we'll hire Crocodile Dundee. Just so we can hear a room full of Jews say, 'Now that's a knife. You can chop it all off with that thing.'" Now, my comedic timing right there was beautiful. What I noticed on the speed and on the Adderall is that I was in too much of a rush to get to the punch. Now, that joke at this stage of my life is older than Yiddish. I christened, I know it's a very super chewy joke, but I'm going to use the expression, I christened the arrival of both of my two sons in this world with that joke. Obviously, you have gold like that on the tip of your tongue, you're going to unleash it to honor the birth of your two beautiful boys. Very fortunate, both my boys were born with full sets of hair. My last one, Samuel, lucky number 3, he was born with a moosed up mohawk. So right out of the womb, I was calling him Rockstar Reddy. Love that nickname. And which his hair was a striking contrast to the baldy, alien-shaped babies with the off-kilter indentations. You know what I'm talking about, right? Where it looks as if the mom had dropped her newborn on an anvil one too many times. Really getting into character, for her, Civil War reenactment, society, gala. And so when you have a boldy alien shaped baby, way harder to love. I'll be completely vain, but it's true. And so I'm very happy that both my kids were born with hair. That Matilda was born with hair too. So back to the speed, raising my kids on speed. So I remember talking about Adderall with my children because I've had the heroin talk with them. I've had the drug talk. I mean, you have to. In this day and age, you have to. All these school shootings, all these kids are on drugs. Ted Nugent is completely correct, 5,000%. And, people say, oh, well, you can't. And I mean, listen, I'm not trying to turn this, podcast episode into a conversation about gun control. However, all of these school shootings, all these kids were on some sort of, psychotic drugs. And like Ted Nugent calls it, it is a form of, chemical warfare. And like Michael Savage says, they closed out all these mental hospitals. Obviously, there's rampant abuses of power, like in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. And we need to bring them back because obviously there's plenty of crazos out in the streets. Another shooting in a newsroom this week. So I pray that mental hospitals are reimagined and brought back because our country needs it more than ever before. And, as far as raising the kids on speed, why did I do it? Well, you do it because you obviously feel more organized. And when you do Adderall, and especially when you're out of work and I bring them any bacon, it produces that artificial feeling of actually working and being a busy bee. That's reminiscent of me being a cold calling, monkey for an IT staffing firm like Robert Half, prior, where you're expected to make your 100 phone calls and, you got to get, back on that wheel and, pound, 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 pound. So I could totally relate to the, speed addicted, 50s housewives of Mad Men. When I hear that song, Mother's Little Helper, is that the song by the Rolling Stones? And I can definitely relate to it on a much more pronounced level, for sure. But this is what's bad about raising your kids on speed. You really don't want your children. I've been able to modulate it, thank God. But one of the reasons, a compliment I always get, why are your kids so behaved? Well, because I make sure that I use my yelling voice sparingly. Now, my yelling voice could be pretty scary. I know I sound very loud right now, but I'm not yelling. I'm just projecting. So, just to give you an idea. And so, it's just like the accusation of calling someone a racist if they're not for complete open borders with no checks and balances whatsoever. So, and just calling that person a racist. And when you do that all the time, or, someone that says, well, the Trump presidency ending the Korean War is a beautiful thing. Peace is great. Ideally, this will have a domino effect. Well, you're a racist. You're a Nazi. All I'm saying is that so much for completely divorcing the podcast from politics. But my point being is that when you just say racist to everything that you disagree with, or you just say racist or Nazi all the time, it loses its meaning. It's stripped of all impactful oomph altogether. And the same applies to raising children. And if you're just going to be yelling all the time, it loses its impact. And the kid's not going to be able to distinguish whether you're truly angry or pissed off or not. So thank God I've been able to rein that in. However, there have been times, like this week, when I've been off the Adderall and I've told the kids, listen, I'm done with it. Don't worry about it. And they know that I would take it because I would take them to the pharmacy. And nothing's worse in this world, people, than going to the pharmacy and finding out that your prescription isn't ready yet. Now, in my case, I wasn't really doubling up on a major basis. However, I would share them with my wife because she works at nights, and then I would be put in that position where I would feel like the physically addicted druggie, which I've never had that problem in my life, regarding anything, really. And So that's an awful feeling. I mean, in terms of like bequeathing that sort of power, over to a drug that really, when it's all said and done, is going to exacerbate and maximize my assholishness. And I'm a native New Yorker. If I know a problem when I was working in staffing is I would talk too fast. So I really had to have my head checked, for taking Adderall as long as I did, knowing that, especially in comedy, they always say laughter is the sound of comprehension. So, but if you talk too fast and people can't understand you clearly, the joke, no matter how funny or insightful, no matter what a word-played, encrusted truth bomb it is, it's not going to make a difference. Or as Hillary Hammertime Kankles would say, what difference does it make if you're on the Adderall? So, thank you, God, for giving me the desire, the strength, and the deep-rooted willingness to close that chapter on my speediness enshrouded parenting portion of my life forever. Thank God. But raising your kids on speed, definitely don't recommend it. We do live in the age of Nespresso machines. We do have more options for green tea than ever before. And, moving forward, and I've always thought about this. So I'm like, Michael, why get high off your children? Like, that should be more than enough. And they really are. They really are. What's great, I love it when my children out of nowhere, and I talk about your children mimicking your behavior. Like, for example, I'm home, wife works at nights, so, I'm responsible for, keeping the house tidy. It's my pleasure. It's no problem at all. I wish my parents were more militant as far as incorporating that discipline for me, making sure I always made my bed, making sure I always took out the garbage, and accepted more responsibility instead of, being content, getting, lost in the, binge drinking and basically not being reliable, as like Ted Nugent would say. That's his major problem with drug abuse, is that you abandon responsibility and your reliability factor altogether. So I'm definitely liking Ted Nugent more every day. He was friends with Anthony Bourdain, by the way. They did like a hunting special together, which I think is really great and really special. And for the record, Anthony Bourdain did not kill himself. I don't see it happening. I mean, has anyone seen the pictures of Anthony Bourdain when he was doing jiu-jitsu on a daily basis? There's this one picture with Iggy Pop where both their tops are off. They're leaning forward. They both look super cool. They both look like rock star royalty. However, in that picture, Andy Bourdain makes Iggy Pop look like the druggy, lost-blooded one. Without a doubt. Who hasn't had a hit since like David Bowie gave a shit. I loved Anthony Bourdain. I mentioned before in the podcast, I never would have started writing stories on Yelp when I stopped doing open mics, and I never would have written, blogs in his honor like Anthony Bourdain rips my frozen lunch apart. I never would have got involved in the food writing. It was all because of him. He's from New Jersey, but he's a New Yorker. I mean, it's the same thing. I loved his confession tone, and that's really what they always say. I read this thing about writing. They say there's no point in writing unless you tell the reader what's in your heart. And, that was another reason why I decided to use this podcast, and not to hide behind fluff. I think I read this line by Gore Vidal last night, famous novelist, writer, essayist, and he said that usually writing is used to conceal and not illuminate, which I thought was very poignant, because, with writing, you could always do, like, the new and improved version, and it's typically not as raw and not as heartfelt. So that was another reason why I wanted to do this podcast. Because I also know that, I mean, let's face it, folks, most writers, if you ever meet them in person, pretty damn boring. Usually social spaz is to the umpth degree. That's not me. So why, hide away from my God-given gift of gab. So I spoke with my mom this week, and she says, son, I feel as if I haven't had this son to talk to in 6 years. But I'm so happy. I'm crying right now knowing that I have you back. And I'm happy that I have you back too, Mom. That Adderall me was definitely purely ego-driven. And I'm going to call him the devil. End the story. I have also deactivated my Twitter account. So I'm definitely going to have to come up with some creative ways to promote this podcast when I'm not on Facebook or Twitter because of my stances on censorship. I think it's very anti-American. And, I mean, what they've done as far as, canceling accounts, for people just, speaking the truth and for being truth tellers, listen, I'm a Jewish New Yorker. I'm all for making fun of Nazis, punishing Nazis. I want evil. I don't want any sort of, racist garbage, on my Twitter feed at all whatsoever. My first piece published was called I Don't Drink German Rieslings, for Christ's sake. And they always say that what's great about comedy is that it gives, especially for Jewish comedians, it's the best form of revenge that we really have available to us outside of, I don't want to talk about murder here, but like defending yourself, but it's the best form of revenge we have because it does allow us to rewrite the narrative and get in the last word. So, which I think is a beautiful thing. And, where does my root of my obsession with speed come from? Being diagnosed as learning disabled before I really had an opportunity to develop any sort of surging mojo in this world definitely didn't help. Especially when my understanding of my learning disability was just because I couldn't hold a pencil the right way and that my penmanship was, barely legible, which is very unfortunate. I remember being on a subway not too long ago, and I was sitting next to this Hasidic Jew, and I was scribbling my notebook, trying to be funny. Was not that prolific back then. I was prolific. My feel for funny wasn't even close there. I hadn't heard that great line from Norm Macdonald from Saturday Night Live, Dirty Work. He says, a joke is where truth meets fiction. And I realized that my problem before was that my material was too on the nose, meaning, too obvious. There wasn't that element of surprise as much. So, I'm a giver, folks. I like to share my words of wisdom that have helped me become a stronger, funnier, deeper, more impressive writer than ever. And I've been at this a while, folks. I'm 22, started writing spec scripts for like Curb, and now I'm 42, and a proud father of 3. So I'll definitely take my snuggling 40s over my slutty filled 20s any day of the week. Although I'll admit, I definitely missed that sweaty sex period, with my wife during that initial 2-month period. You gotta love the sweaty sex period, right? Especially when like the bed elevates, while like you're pulverizing your significant other's, snatch, and in essence, you're like defying all laws of gravity. You're pounding downward, yet elevating the bed. It's a beautiful thing. So, and the thing is that I'm not going to call them friends anymore, because I wrote a piece a long time ago called The Friendship Litmus Test. Let me revise that. Someone is not a friend in this world if they go out of their way to try to make you feel like a lesser human being in this world because you're temporarily not generating money for the economy despite you being a full-time caretaker of 3 and trying to relaunch your entertainment career. And I just don't understand. Like, Louis C.K. is completely right. These people that don't have children suffer from severest delusions of grandeur. I'm sorry, folks, but I'm not saying you need children to make your life feel complete. I'm not saying you need kids to be deemed by God as a truly wholesome, giving, loving human being. However, having children does bring out the best of you, and it does unearth your latent inner beauty that could be beaten down and squeezed out of you, in corporate America, especially if you're working at jobs that you hate and detest. And it's great that you have your apartment in Soho that you pay $4,000 for, even though you got bed bugs. But I'm sorry, I'm not jealous of your bank account. I'm not jealous of the fact that you sell ads for a living. You're not a creator. And when you're not a creator, forget comedy and scripts. You haven't created life. I remember when I got married, this one guy, Carson, said, you guys should have lots of kids. You guys would produce, you guys would pump out a lot of good in the world. He was very prophetic, Carson. Very prophetic. Because, what I realized is that, my kids, whenever I'm out and about, they produce instant joy. My youngest son, Samuel, he gets stopped at a Stop and Shop in the Hickey hinterlands in northern Westchester. Not once, but 10 times. On average, when he's out with my wife. That's insanity. That's complete craziness. So, it's definitely a source of pride for me, knowing that, I've been able to create this loving Kiss Army family of mine, and having kids where I've been able to be, well, the Adderall, has made me edgy, and it has made me very obsessed, and to be honest with you, has, turned off employers due to my, persistent, craziness at times as far as following up. I could definitely assign my blame for completely ruining my relationship with Jay Moran, who was the producer boss, my benefactor, who granted me the opportunity to work for America's Hot 100, become a paid TV writer, which was 12 years in the making. And I love Jay for that. He gave me a shot. I had to put together a writing sample. I did it. I made it happen. He gave me another shot for another job. Did that as well. Developed a pilot. Provided some editing services. And he got me in the big room. He got me in the ring. I was able to compete. Pitch my own pilot. Heavy Metal High. Star vehicle for Dice. My adopted, life coach figure that appears in the nurse's office after I achieve puberty. And he appears in a cloud of smoke and then starts clapping. Says, "Congratulations, you finally achieved blast off, jerk off." And that's how I feel right now. I love the role of being life coach. My kids are in camp right now. 2 of them are, and they're thriving. And in this world, I think that if you could raise children, that are, not dependent on drugs for happiness, but, instead, get addicted, to winning and loving and giving and being leaders and getting the most out of others, then, you as a parent, and when it's all said and done, in the twilight of your life, when you're raging into dying in the light, you could die a contented man. And I'm going to continue doing that. But kids, it's going to be the new and improved me, the non-speedy me, the more giving me, the more loving me, the more beautiful manifestation of me, the more Ralph Waldo Emerson, nature crooning me. Obviously, I'm not going to become a complete edgeless, humorless douchebag, but, these sort of maniacal, oh, I got to feed the Twitter machine, oh, I got to respond to this, that's done. Ego's pretty secure. I've impressed my role models, but like Billy Idol says, like the Nick DiPaolos, Richard Lewis's, Margaret Cho's, Steve Summers, WFN, I can go on and on, but the point being is, like Billy Idol, one time he had to, and I'll wrap things up right now, I read in his book, he had the opportunity to collaborate with Lou Reed, and Lou Reed actually had not the goal, but he insisted that he pay him for the privilege, and Billy Idol said, F off, true punk rock rebellion spirit, and Billy Idol's imparting message here was, F your role models, and I agree. In this world, you want to be heard, and if you want to make your own breaks, you got to trust yourself, like Bob Dylan says in that song that I read to my son last night. Trust in yourself, and double down, triple down, quadruple down on your belief in you, and you'll make your dreams come true. I had a dream to write for TV. I've done that. And these putzes that try to act like authorities on comedy, that work in sales, that are glamorized schleppers, they who think they're better than they are. I'm sorry, I don't know what you really dreamed of that you sacrificed for, that you achieve in this world, that I should really give a shit about, that I find impressive. It's pretty common to me. And what isn't common is, do-it-all dads, in this society that not only accept the responsibility, but thrive on it, where it brings the best out of them. And they don't compete with their children, but they want them to do even better. And that's a beautiful thing. I think it's something that God wants of all men. And, I've said it before, I think men do possess the power to be more impactful, even stronger educators, and better and active disciplinarians than our wives. And, my kids are living proof of it. They're super behaved, and I'm in the car this morning. I'm asking my son a question. I made some smoothies, and I said, so, Archo, if I make the smoothie tomorrow, if I make it look prettier, will you give it a shot? Will you take a sip? And he was like, he's like slurring. And I said, Archo, it's a yes or no question. And then he started storytelling and started giving me an answer. And I had a flashback to when I was doing headhunting when I was 22 in LA. My old boss, my wormy boss, Alex Dubovoy, would talk down to me, which is fine. That was his job. I mean, I did learn from him a little bit. But whatever, it was his job to explode me for all it was worth. But, however, I will give Alex Dubovoy credit. He did say that don't storytell. It's a yes or no question. And I was able to incorporate that to my son today. And then eventually he came around, and I repeated the question. I go, don't storytell, yes or no. And I said, Archo, if I make a smoothie, pretty next time, will you drink it? And he goes, yeah! And I said, that's what I like to hear, because I want to hear, yeah! Yeah! And then he got really into it. So, this is Do It All Dad Here podcast. Dad-friendly entertainment for you and me. Yeah! And I love you all. For new listeners, old listeners, sustained interest. I'm not completely abandoning my joke onslaught lifestyle podcast of old. However, this has been a very significant week for myself as far as getting myself off the speed. I've had my breaks before, but this time I'm really serious about it, and I wanted to be on record. And one last thing, I read this book that was given to my children here in Northern Westchester called How to Raise a Drug-Free Child, and what I burned through it like in a night. And my parting wisdom here is 90% of kids, they never touch Adderall, weed, alcohol, cocaine, the entire gamut. They don't touch any stuff by high school, then chances are they will never be like mental cripples, and they're never going to be addicted to it. So that's my goal, but you can't be a hypocrite, and kids learn from your behavior. My dad smoked cigarettes, so I smoke cigarettes. I don't do that anymore. It's been a long time, but I also would waste away winters watching the Knicks suck up the joint. I've done the same thing. But so all I'm saying here, folks, my little kid Samuel, he tries to mimic my push-ups. He can't do a push-up. It looks like he's humping the floor, but it's adorable. So kids mirror their parents' habits. So the sooner you can develop good habits and replace with bad habits, the better. This is Do It All Dad Here podcast. Dad-friendly entertainment for you and me. Talk to you guys soon.